Hi, I'm Dan Pablaki. You are listening to Our First Fears, a podcast about gateway horror, past and present, with artists working in the genre today. Today I'm giddy to be speaking with Ellen Oh, the author of many novels, as well as the editor of quite a few story anthologies, all of which are geared towards kids. Ellen also helped found We Need Diverse Books, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing diversity in children's literature. Ellen's works range the gamut from fantasy to contemporary and historical fiction, all the way over to scary as HE double hockey sticks. See, she's the author of the very spooky Spirit Hunters series, which I just adore, and recently Haru, Zombie Dog Hero, which I can't wait to get my grubby mitts on. For Ellen's first fear, we discuss how her parents and her father in particular had a hand in introducing her to horror, for better and definitely also for worse, with stories and legends of spirits who may or may not visit after lights out. We also chat about zombies, both slow and fast, because Ellen's latest book, Haru, takes place during a zombie apocalypse. And we sort of pick apart the notion of how stories, long and short, manage to keep our attention. The conversation is a road trip all over some kind of very fun, slightly spooky map, and I, for one, had a blast recording this one a few weeks back. I loved chatting with Ellen because, as you'll soon notice, she had me cracking up the whole way through. She also put up with my continued jitters as a new podcaster, and finally she ended up throwing me some really nice compliments about my latest book duology, Tales to Keep You Up at Night, and more Tales to Keep You Up at Night, which never hurts. As a quick heads up, for anyone interested in listening to this podcast with young people present, Ellen's episode is certainly kid-friendly. I think? You'll let me know, I'm sure. Now, turn down the lights, turn up the volume, and get ready to explore Our First Fears. Hi, Ellen. It's so nice to see you and have you on the show. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to see you and talk to you. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's been a while. Um, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship to the scary horror genre? Tell us about yourself, maybe a little bit about the scary things and some not so scary things that you have created over the course of your career. And just so our listeners can get a sense of who we're talking to.
Okay, sure. When I first got published, I was published with a YA trilogy, a fantasy trilogy that was set in ancient Korea about demons that enter the world and they will eat your insides. They will eat you inside out, and then they will
Mm,
wear your skin like a costume, like a Halloween costume. And that was always like my favorite part of writing that series.
wow.
And so that was my young adult fantasy series. And then I started writing scary middle grade books because I had started reading all of yours, Dan, and I'm such a huge fan. And like, I just love writing scary, right? It's kind of like the reason why I think I love writing scary is because I came from a family that loved to scare me from a very young age. And I then became a parent that loved to scare her own kids. And then I realized that I could write scary stories and scare thousands of other people's children. What great joy. So I
Yes,
wrote
you are one of my kind of people.
exactly, exactly. We are so simpatico. And so I wrote this middle grade series called Spirit Hunters about a girl with the ability to see ghosts, and like her power starts growing from that. And I really enjoyed that. And I
So did
now,
I.
oh, thank you. And I now have a new horror book that just came out this week. It's called Haru, Zombie Dog Hero, and people are like always asking me, why zombie dogs? And it's because I have two dogs that I adore, and they love to sit on my lap whenever I'm eating snacks. And so one day I was eating popcorn and they're just sitting there, and they do that puppy dog stare.
Hmm.
And I was just looking at them and I realized something. I realized that they would never hurt me, even if they were zombies, as long as I had popcorn. So at that
As
moment,
long as you had popcorn.
yeah, so I came up with this idea of zombie dogs. So it's a cute little story for a book that's kind of really scary and horrifying, but hey, that's just how my mind works.
That's great. I think that is one of my favorite titles of the year. It's a brilliant idea, and I can't wait to talk a little bit more about that with you. I know I've been asking my guests to come on and sort of choose their own topic, and so we're going to be talking a little bit about zombies and a little bit about Korean folklore, folk tales, and stories that your dad used to tell you. So I'm excited to get into that stuff, but I want to start with a question that I'm asking all of my guests, and that is, do you remember the first time you ever felt frightened?
I do. It's okay. So when I was very small, my immigrant parents decided to take me to a doubleheader scary movie thon. I don't know, and it was a it was a what do you call those when there's two movies back to back?
Double feature?
Right, right. So it was a double feature, and it was The Wolf Man and I think something Snake Man. Maybe I don't know. This up. I was little. I might have been like 2 or 3. That's how little we're talking about. And they had taken me with them they wanted to go see the movies. They'd taken me with them because they didn't have a babysitter. And I sat through these horrifying movies. And my mom always says that she had to cover her eyes because it was too frightening. But when she would look at me, I would be staring straight, like unblinking at the screen. And so my mom said, oh, she was so impressed that this little child wasn't scared. And I was always like, woman, why didn't you cover my eyes? I was traumatized. And I do remember after that having just nightmares, just like constant. I don't think I knew what a nightmare was until after seeing those movies. So yes, that began
Wow.
horror.
So it was the double feature. You said it was a drive-in?
I don't think it was a drive-in, but I don't remember. Like I feel I was so little that it could have been a drive-in. It could have been a movie theater. I'm not really sure. I just know that I was traumatized for life after that.
And it was monsters. It was the movie Monsters that did it.
Yes, it was
Okay.
absolutely the monsters.
Very interesting. Okay. I that's cool. Like, I remember movies were a huge part of my own sort of coming to horror, and they did come with nightmares too, but for some reason I was able to just put all that stuff aside and continue my love for like the sort of adrenaline rush that these kinds of stories gave me. Um, yeah, I remember dreaming about monsters when I was a little kid, and I still look back in my own writing now to sort of find inspiration in those absolutely bonkers, things that woke me up in the middle of the night gasping for air.
I
Do
don't
you
know.
feel like do you feel like any of those things that any of that moment in that movie theater sort of influenced who you become as a horror fan?
It probably absolutely started it there because I think that I became no, I never became numb to scary. Like I'm still very easy to scare. Uh, so I never got to the point where, oh, like, I don't know people who are like very blasé about scary things. Like, oh, that's not scary. I'm like, everything is scary. Um, but I also, I guess in some way do get that rush from it, right? That jump scare, that, ugh, and that, afterward you're just kind of like, the relief of it is actually
Hmm.
the best feeling, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
you've been frightened out of your mind, and then you know that you're safe. That absolute feeling of relief is, I think, probably the best feeling. That sheer relief. It's just cathartic at that point.
Yeah, I
And
was going to say the
right, and I think that that's
catharsis.
probably why a lot of people love to get scared, because it's, horrifying, and then immediate relief to know that you're okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's fair, and I've actually heard that from a couple other people who I've spoken to on the show. The catharsis is definitely an element, and I think part of that comes with especially with a jump scare. It's like that kind of laughter that the rest of the room sort of if you're not by yourself, sort of like the rest of the audience is like, oh, that person got super scared, or like we all just kind of laugh it out. And I think that's part of the fun. um, so, speaking about zombies and stories from your dad, something that you mentioned when we were discussing topics, you said that that Korean people are masters of all things scary, um, and and having watched many Korean horror films recently, I can absolutely agree with you. What do you think makes Korean people masters of the scary or the macabre?
I don't know that I know exactly why that is. I just have theories, right? Like, so
Hmm.
uh, there are some theories that because Korea as a country has historically been invaded so often, that there is a lot of, you know, um, like sadness, that, historically, because they've been invaded so much, because they lost so many
Yeah,
cultural parts of their history.
yeah,
Um, and I think that that sadness is not sustainable, right? And um, you have to kind of do everything you can to kind of strengthen yourself as a people. And I do think that scary stories are one of those ways, in a very kind of indirect way. I think it's why Korean parents scare their kids from a young age. I can't imagine like millennial parents these days like having, in fact, that's a funny story. My daughter is a camp counselor, and they did like a round of scary spooky stories one night with the second grade campers, and she immediately got
classic.
an email from
Oh
somebody
yeah.
saying, my child was scared, all night long and didn't get any sleep, and you should not be telling these scary stories. And I'm like, woman, you should try being in Korea. They not only will take you to a monster feature when you're two, but they tell you the scariest stories. Like, my dad would always tell me the most
Yeah.
horrifying stories of
These are what I want
monsters.
to. These are what I
Right.
want to hear about.
Right. So, like, from a young age, my dad was always into, telling me stories about bad, monsters that ate bad children, always named Ellen. So, like, it's, that kind of cultural thing. I feel like I remember talking to other my friends, my Korean American friends, and I was like, "Did your parents tell you scary stories?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, right? Oh yeah, the Gushin, the Korean girl ghost that." It's like, I think it's the idea of a virgin girl ghost that dies and comes and just like goes after all like the single men or married men, and then there's like demons and monsters and all of these things, that they just like, well, they want to train you not to be a bad kid by horrifying you to death. I don't know. This is a very Korean thing, I guess. And like, I remember one time, yeah, and I always tell this story. My dad told me about a monster that will call your name 3 times, and you
Mm.
can't turn around and you can't respond until after the third time. Otherwise, it will eat your face, right? And I remember he told me the story, and then late at night, and this is my father for you, he came to my door and he, Ellen,
Oh
and then, Ellen. And then he went away. So like the whole night I was like under my sheets going, there was no third Ellen. I'm not safe. The monster's gonna eat my face. Like, I'm like 8 years old, and I am just like peeing in the bed because I am not leaving my room. So
oh my
yeah.
god.
So yes. So out of revenge, I grew up and I decided to scare all my children. But they had therapy. I never had therapy. My kids had
Oh,
therapy, so
Ellen, I'm
they're
sorry.
okay.
That is too funny and absolutely horrible. And but also like I kind of feel like if I had kids, I'd probably do the same thing. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
that.
It's a terrible thing having a mom who writes scary stories, because even worse than my parents, like now we have like technology that helps you scare your kids, you know, like you can
Mhm.
download creepy sounds, and when your kid has a sleepover party, you coordinate with your husband. One goes outside and plays scary stories and scratches on the window, and the other one goes in the front and starts playing scary. Yeah. I scared a bunch of like 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15. Yeah, whenever I have a chance, we did it.
I think 13-year-olds deserve it.
Oh, agree. I
I
agree.
mean, there's some wonderful 13-year-olds out there, but like, yeah, I mean, that's around the time when you need to start, you know, letting them know a little bit about how the world can be, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I think about, I know this, I want to keep this conversation about you, but like I think about my own parents' stories that way they would tell me. And my mom was always a good storyteller. My dad too, but my, my mom, my mom's stories were never about like ghosts or, the, the, the creepy things from the dark. Like she always told me like, I was hiking in the woods with my friend and they fell and they broke their arm and they were like, go and get help. And so I went out and left them in the forest. And when I came back, they were gone and they were never seen again.
That's
And
so
I was like,
much worse.
isn't it? Isn't it? And I was like, Mom, tell me the story again about the broken arm in the woods. Or even as simple as like, I went to visit my friend for dinner. Her daughter, was served green beans and she refused to eat the green beans. The mother said, well, if you're not going to eat your green beans, you're going to regret it. And the girl was, crossed her arms and was like, I'm not eating those. And my mom told me that the next morning they all got together at the breakfast table, and wouldn't you know, those green beans came right back out on the same plate to be served to that little girl who refused. And I know it's not a typically scary story, but like I felt like that was like my first twist ending.
Okay, Dan, I have a story for you. When I
Yeah.
was in high school, my mom decided that I needed to go on a diet. And
Oh.
so that night, a plate of broccoli came out. Just broccoli with a little bit of sauce. That's it.
Oh
Nothing
no.
else. Everybody else had food. I had broccoli. And I ate one stalk and I said, I'm not hungry. And I went to bed. And the next day, that same plate of broccoli came out.
It,
2 days
it's
more.
a it's a universal
Yes.
fear. It's a universal tactic. Parents. I don't
Yes.
know if like you said, like the millennial parents, getting emails about scary stories from camp. Don't scare my kids. Like, no, not when we were kids. It was like,
I
oh, you're
feel
gonna eat your broccoli. Oh, you're gonna listen to what I say, or you're gonna regret it.
exactly, exactly. I feel like if I came home and said, to my parents, they told scary stories at school today and I'm scared, my parents would just like laugh at me and go, so let me tell you a scary story, like,
What was the scariest story that your dad ever told you? If it wasn't the one about knocking on the door, which, to be honest, sounds like, a true nightmare.
I feel like that was the scariest also because of the prank that he pulled on me.
Mm-hmm.
It became like if he told me anything scarier, it has been eclipsed by that story because
Mm.
it's so unforgettable, and I literally was traumatized by that.
I'm
So I,
sorry.
oh no, it's just like when I think about it, I actually think it's funny. So I do think that horror and fear, laughter, that's kind of like that perfect balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I do think it's funny because like the next day, I told my dad. Like I couldn't sleep all night because what he did, and he laughed for 10 minutes straight. Like he just laughed, like till tears came out of his eyes. Laughed, right? And I was like, "You're so mean. That's so wrong." And he's like, "Watch, you're gonna be scared again tonight." I was like, "No, I'm not, because I know it's just you like messing with me." And that night, he didn't even have to come and pull the prank, and I couldn't sleep once again, like just all night, couldn't sleep. So
I want to meet your dad.
he
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, he unfortunately he passed away several years ago. But yeah, like
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. He
his
sounds amazing.
yeah, no, he wasn't. His stories I think live in my in my heart, and which is why like I feel that when I write scary stories, I'm always channeling my dad.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Did your dad have a relationship with your own kids?
He did like
Did he
my
try and scare them too?
no
Oh, so it's not okay for a grandparent to do
parent
this.
no like, and I tell you, it's definitely a thing that parents will just mess you up, mess their own kids up, and then when it comes to the grandkids, they literally want to be like grand angels. Like we
Mm.
can do no wrong, no matter what
Hmm.
your parents say. We were angels, like that kind of thing.
Yep. I get it. I get it. Same. Same over here. um, you know, you you have written several other genres of books for kids
Hmm.
and edited anthologies as well. And I was wondering, how does that feel like differently when you're creating other genres like Finding Junie Kim or was it Flying Lessons, and the new one that just came out. I can't remember the title,
You
the
are
airport
here,
one.
yeah. The
Yeah.
airport. Mhm.
What like what do you have to reach into different parts of your storytelling toolkit in order to sort of recalibrate in terms of a different kind of story other than scary?
Huh, that's interesting. If I think about it, I do feel like there's gonna always be an element of fear in all of my stories. So, for example, in Finding Junie Kim, it is set during since it's contemporary and it's also historical fiction, right? Because it's kind of like a not even a duel; it's like a three POV kind of story. Um, just the actual horrors of the war is very scary,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
bullying for my main character in school is also scary. So, like, I feel like you don't, when I'm writing, whatever genre I write in, I do lean into fears because fear is part of our life, right? Fear, anxiety, stress, worry, all of that. I
Mm.
do. I also believe that the reason why I like to write that for children's literature is to let kids know that these fears are normal and that it'll be okay, right? So that's what I always kind of lean into. Yes, this happens. If you feel it, this is normal, and it will be okay. It'll work out, right? So, like,
Yeah.
I also wrote a fantasy novel, and again, I have monsters in there because it's a fantasy. I'm
Is that Dragon Egg Princess?
Yeah, for Dragon Egg
Yeah.
Princess, and yeah, so like I do try to lean into fear in all of my genres, um,
Mhm.
which then
So you
goes.
Yeah, so you have that your I guess your storytelling toolbox is the same for all of your tales then.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that makes a lot of sense. Um, it's funny when people talk about, when people talk about like, when you're talking about getting an email about the scary stories from a concerned parent, like I think it's funny that the horror genre, especially for kids, can get a bad rap. I know for me in particular, I I've my career has been more specifically horror focused. And I don't often get, invitations to schools and libraries, but when I do, the librarians are, very, very excited. They're like, oh, your books fly off the shelf. But in terms of school visits, like I don't necessarily get PTA like excitement about like, oh, this guy who's trying to scare our kids is going to come and scare our kids,
I
But
don't.
the way
That's
that you talk,
awful because you would
I
be
mean,
amazing presenting at school. The kids would love you so much.
I've always had a good time and I think I'm pretty good at it. So like,
I know
here's
you.
me, self promoting. There we go. Um, but it's interesting to hear you talk about, your non-horror genre books also dealing with kids who are feeling fear. And I think what a lot of parents don't understand, and a lot of parents do understand it, and that's wonderful, and congrats. But what a lot of parents and even some gatekeepers don't understand is that the element of fear, it can exist in any kind of book. Like I think of like I've been reading like survival, like children wilderness survival stories, and Hatchet is
Mhm.
absolutely terrifying. I don't know if you've ever read that one about the kid who crash lands in the mountains
Oh
after
no.
his the pilot of this small plane um has a heart attack and dies. And like it's absolutely terrifying. He spends like a good number of months in the woods. Or Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell, like
Hmm.
this girl left behind by her people on an island, and her brother's eaten by wild dogs.
Right.
It's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
are these stories ever considered horror?
Of course
No.
not. No.
But do they have the opportunity to scare? Absolutely. So
Absolutely.
I think it's very interesting to sort of think about what you just said.
I think it's a really
Yeah.
important point too. I don't know what the distinction is. Like you just told me about two survivor stories that I would absolutely find terrifying, and I know like would be very traumatizing also for some kids, right? Until they get to the point where they reach the
Hmm.
relief part, and then that's cathartic.
Yeah.
So I feel like this unfair rap you're talking about for horror is really more about the gatekeepers, to be
Mm.
honest. Because I think when I meet kids, I always hear the kids go, "No, it's not scary enough. Oh, it's not that scary." And it's the librarians and the teachers that are like, "I couldn't finish your book, Ellen. It was too scary
Yeah.
for me," right? And I'm like, I don't think
Yeah.
I've met a kid
Same.
that said that.
Yeah. That's exactly been my experience. But I've also been lucky enough to speak with educators and librarians who were like, it was too scary for me, but I still understand like it's getting my students to read. And I'm like,
Exactly.
yep, that's exactly what I was going for.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you were going for. And a lot of people who are have discovered the joy of writing scary stuff for kids is, like it's almost a tool. Like it's like a lure to get you into reading books. Speaking about fear and fear in kid lit in general, like I wanted to ask you about um your book Spirit Hunters with Harper, the main character who sort of starts, it's like seeing spirits and having this new ability. And I know at certain points um, she discusses bullying that she's experienced, and bullying having to do with her identity and her race, and like the feeling of injustice that she has. Do you feel like, uh, in general, like the horror genre can play around with? I mean, clearly you do feel that the horror genre can play around with the ideas of equity and equality and injustice and fighting against that stuff. One of the things that I think makes Harper so appealing is the fact that she's totally unwilling to put up with this stuff. How do you feel like including that kind of discussion in middle grade horror? How does that work for you?
I think it's just mirroring life. And for me, that's really when I write. Like, here I am writing a scary monster story or a scary ghost story, but it's still rooted very firmly in reality. And in that reality is
Yeah.
racism. In that reality is bullying. So that's how I'm going to tell the story, right? And because I like to write strong characters that are about fighting back or standing up for themselves, whether it is in strong or in a more passive way. uh, I think it's important to show them dealing with the issues, with the injustices that many kids will suffer in life, right?
Hmm.
So, whether I'm writing horror, fantasy, or contemporary or historical fiction, it's always going to be rooted in my reality, what my kids see, what I see still out in the world. And so that's just always going to be part of my writing. Even with Haru, Zombie Dog Hero, we're in a zombie apocalypse, but there is an element of not only racism but also social economic, issues
Hmm.
that are going to affect how the apocalypse starts, right? And I think that um, you take horrors in real life and you put them into a horror novel, it, in some ways, it really kind of makes it more.
It
Um,
amplifies it.
yes, it amplifies it exactly in a way that sometimes people don't see in reality, and I do like that also.
Yeah. It's a way to bring the sort of the fantastic that you may be writing about and tie it into somebody's real, like a character's real inner life and real inner struggles, so that like the interior sort of starts to mirror the exterior. And I think you do a really great job of that in Spirit Hunters. I can't wait to read Haru Zombie Dog Hero. I want to pick it up ASAP.
Thank you. In Spirit Hunters, actually, one of the reasons why Madame Devereux, as a African American spirit, right from the past, one of the reasons I loved her character was when I did research about cemeteries in Washington D.C. that I had never known about segregated cemeteries until that moment,
Mm,
and
hmm.
so I think I forget. There is a novel now on a segregated cemetery. It might be The Lost Girl. Oh, I'm forgetting. It's a great middle grade novel, and
India Hill Brown.
yeah, uh-huh.
Yes. Oh, I loved that book. I
That
loved
is
that book.
absolutely such a wonderful book. But like that idea of segregated cemeteries. Wow, like that kind of blew
Hmm.
my mind, right?
Me too.
Yeah. So like that's when you showcase it. My books are never about just the racism alone,
Sure. Yeah.
right? But it's just part of the reality of that story.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Tell me, so since we're sort of moving on to Haru a little bit, talking about the zombie dog apocalypse, like tell me what your first experience with zombies in pop culture was like. Do you remember?
Yes, I
Was
do.
it from your childhood? Was it more recent?
Oh no, it was. Do you remember there was? Oh, it might have been a New York thing. I don't know. I'm not sure. There was this. Was it Friday night horror movies, and the hand would come out, and the hand would like go like and then like eat the things on the ground in front of it, and then and disappear. And that was always the introduction for whatever Friday night horror film fest was
Mm.
going to come. And I remember that. I always found that hand so frightening. I don't know why. It's just a hand and
Oh,
terrible
absolutely.
effects, but I was little, and I
I
think
had I speaking of hands, I had my one of my early experiences watching a movie that wasn't even necessarily horror, and maybe I watched it too young. I probably did. Did you ever see Deliverance?
I probably isn't that what the banjos
Yeah, the
like?
banjos and these guys, these city slicker guys, white guys coming down to have their, you know, have one of their last hurrahs on a river that is about to be flooded to, you know, make make some kind of dam or reservoir for the community down there, and things are changing very quickly. They want to take advantage of it. They get into some big trouble with some locals,
Right.
and it sort of turns into like who can survive this, and let's get out of here. And the river is sort of their deliverance from that experience. But at the very end, I don't think I'm spoiling it for anybody or for you by saying one of the survivors wakes from a dream in which there's this he's looking out over this surface of very still surface of water. It might be the reservoir, and this shaky pale hand sort of like rises up out of the water, and like then he wakes up like kind of jump scare, like oh my gosh, like with the idea of like this experience will haunt him forever. So like I've always been scared of hands racing out of the ground, out of water. So I totally get how that would have affected you. I probably watched that movie when I was 8 years old, and I can't believe I did.
Well, Carrie also has that. The
Oh
hand
yeah,
comes right.
yeah,
Oh,
absolutely one of the scariest ending. Like might be the proto twist jump scare ending. Like
might be, yeah.
yeah.
That was horrifying. Horrifying, yeah. So, now I forgot what we were talking about.
You're talking about your
Oh,
early
it's
experiences with zombies.
zombies. Yeah, I think it was one of those like old movies, and it was the first zombies were the slow ones. That's what I remember.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
slow shambling zombies, right? And
Yeah.
still, I don't know why they're so terrifying. Uh,
What? So are you a fan of the shambling zombie or the fast zombie? The more recent
I'm
fast zombie.
I'm gonna be honest. The fast zombies scare the crap out of me. Oh my
Mm,
gosh, they like they scare me so badly because
yeah.
now they're
It's
fast and now they
yeah.
think, right?
Did you see? I mean, I was just looking. Like, I'm sure you've seen Train to Busan,
Love it.
Peninsula, even the Seoul Station, the animated prequel. Those movies are. If you haven't seen that one, it's really worth it
I
because
don't
it
know, but
it explores.
have you seen the
It
historical one? Is it Kingdom?
I haven't, but is that worth it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
really scary.
What What about any K dramas? Are there K dramas that you've seen that deal with zombies? Or, I know you're a fan of those as well.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely several like really horrifying K dramas, and I can't remember the zombie ones. There are, I think the ones that really scared me are the ones with the demons. And
Mm,
I'm going to be honest, like, zombies are scary when they're fast. Slow zombies aren't scary. I feel like I could take them, right? But
hmm.
the fast zombies, I don't think I could take. But anything with demon, like the devil and like anything like that,
Mm,
those scare me the most
mm.
more than any other like frightful creature. I kind of almost have a fondness for zombies compared to
Hmm.
compared
Compared to
to
the other stuff
yes,
that's more scary to you.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
fair. Fair enough. So you mentioned that there is a sort of social economic element to the zombies in Haru, and that is definitely something I've recognized in a lot of the classic zombie genre pieces. Clearly, George A. Romero's he was always on had his finger on the pulse of social justice. And this is a very clunky question, and I apologize if you don't want to answer. Like, what is the metaphor of your book? You don't have to. But how, like, you did mention it earlier. So like, how did you come to that element of the Haru story?
Well,
Or if you want to, you can sort of give us like a little synopsis of Haru first, and then maybe answer the question.
sure, sure. So like, okay, at its heart, Haru is about a boy and his dog and their really really strong love and bond. I mean, just it really is about that unbreakable bond between a boy and his dog. That's the heart of it. It's kind of like a love story in that way, right?
Mhm.
It just happens to happen during a zombie apocalypse. Uh, for me, the social economic part of it, and I know that was really vague, but I want people to read the book. But for me, the socioeconomic part of it came from the fact that I hate billionaires. I really do. I think billionaires
Fair.
are evil, right? I,
Yes, agreed.
just hands down, they are the most evil people. In fact, I saw some mathematician talk about how mathematically, if you figure out a formula on how a billionaire makes their money, there's just mathematically it proves that billionaires are evil because the money would have to come from horrible labor practices in order to get that much
Of
money, and
course.
therefore they're evil. And I was like, yes, exactly.
And
I
that,
didn't need to be a mathematician to know that, though. But
yeah, that in itself is a horror story, and it is in so many kinds of different horror tales. The element of, you know, the rich person taking advantage over the rest of us.
exactly. And so the whole idea of billionaires being evil and being the root of almost all bad things in the world, because that's true too. That was really the social economic piece of it. Like, it is
Hmm.
this billionaire's desire to be young forever, to
Mm.
outlive life itself, that causes basically all of this animal testing and cruelty that
Hmm.
then triggers the apocalypse, right? So
Okay,
that gives you the answer right there. So
good.
the metaphor is billionaires are evil. So is that a metaphor? That's just fact, actually.
But the I guess the dissolution of a society that is functioning in a way that is beneficial to its, citizens and inhabitants, like the dissolution, the decay of that. I think that's probably where the metaphor comes in, right?
That was much. That was much better than what I said. Thank you, Dan.
Well, thank you. In terms of the boy and his dog sort of idea or theme, I've found it's definitely a thing in children's literature where animals are in danger, and I always have a hard time getting through stories like that, and I know a lot of people do too. How do you feel that you were able to sort of synthesize keeping things level when it came to Haru becoming a zombie, or dealing with, whatever struggles he's dealing with in the book? Like, it's how did you deal with that?
Well, again, I always root myself in reality, right? Animal cruelty is a reality in life. In some ways, I do think it's important to raise awareness to that there are so many animals, because there are cats in my book too, right? Lovely
Oh,
cats. There are so many abandoned animals out there. There are so many terrible things that happen to animals, and that we as humans have a responsibility to look out for and take care of our our animal brethren in the world. In all ways, not just like people being cruel to them, but the environment. You know, climate change, all the things that affects wildlife as much as it affects humans, and in some ways worse for them, right? So again, like I know there are going to be people who have a hard time with aspects of my book. I can tell them that I always strive for a happy ending, right?
mhm.
Uh, and also, I think that don't shy away from bad things. Read it, and then hope for the best, and then know that things that happen in the world are still happening, and that it is our responsibility to know and to be proactive in that fight to save our world.
Yeah,
That's just how I go about the writing. But I also don't shy away from anything. So that's just
yeah,
my personality.
good. I think that's a good way to have a personality. That's a very awkward thing to say, but that's a good
It's
way
okay.
to have a
I'm
personality,
awkward
Ellen.
too.
So I guess sort of to tie things up a little bit. So we've worked together on a couple things. One of which was an audio drama that was sort of organized by R.L. Stein. It was you and me and Justin A. Reynolds, and we also were able to participate long ago in a very, very fun panel at the was it American Library Association?
Yeah, it was.
Um, it was part of We Need Diverse Books, and a group of us talking about our horror novels. And I know as the founder, one of the founders of We Need Diverse Books. You've edited some anthologies, having to like collecting authors and having them write around a theme or even around like a story. And I was wondering, like, do you think that there's a place for an anthology of middle grade horror? What do you think? I'm not asking you to, pitch an idea that somebody else out there is going to go and take, but like, do you think that that would be a possibility? And how do you make an anthology with a bunch of other authors telling separate stories? How do you make that work, and how do you try and sell it to a publisher?
Okay, so let's see. First of all, I actually know about a middle grade horror anthology that I think was is in the works. I was
Mm-hmm.
supposed to try to join that one. Unfortunately, I just had a time commitment and I couldn't. Um, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't do our own horror middle grade anthology, Dan, because actually, we've been talking about doing that for years now, like with
Yeah,
Ron Smith and with
yeah.
Tracy Baptiste. I mean, like we just need to get on the ball and just work on that. But separately, how do you put an anthology together? For me, it's always about a theme, right? Like with Flying Lessons, the theme was like tell a story that you would have liked to have read when you were younger, because this was for very specifically BIPOC and marginalized creators writing kind of like contemporary fiction, uh, and putting together this anthology of stories so that kids could recognize themselves in them and that other kids could see the vast diversity of our world, right? So that was kind of like the broad theme. But since then, since Flying Lessons, I tend to now do anthologies that are much more focused.
Mm,
Thousand Beginnings and Endings was a fantasy fantasy anthology very specifically aimed at retellings of Asian folklore. And then in for You Are Here, I would actually say it's not an anthology. There are 12
okay.
contributors that work together closely to
Hmm.
create what I would say my editor told me is an episodic novel. And I love
I
that,
love that.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the theme for that really, so there's a long story about how it came about, but basically we started working on that during the pandemic because of the rise of hate against specifically East Asian and Southeast Asian Americans. And we wanted to kind of celebrate the identity of Asian Americans, because Asian Americans are very are like that group of people that are very specifically living in that in between space of, for some people we're never American enough, and for others we're never Asian enough, and so we have to kind of forge this different like identity that's Asian American, and what does that even mean when you've got like 47 countries that make up Asia, or maybe even more, who knows, like how many, right? And so many
Yeah.
different cultures and so vast. And how do you then encapsulate that all into a term, Asian American? So
Hmm.
there are a lot of difficulties with that too, but we wanted to still celebrate what we were, right? Specifically East Asian and Southeast Asian Americans. And so our theme was really going to be about like, kind of celebrating our identity and standing up against racism. So that episodic novel, You Are Here, really does. Uh, have a lot of those issues in there, like, coming to terms with our identity, dealing with racism and bullying, dealing with microaggressions, and also just like dealing with being American in a country where sometimes you're told you don't belong a lot,
Mm,
right? So it's
yeah.
very complicated, very complex, but I think ultimately we did a fantastic job putting that all together, and I loved it. Now, going back to the horror idea, I would love to do something similar
Yeah.
for a horror anthology episodic novel. But yeah, I would love it to do something, but make sure that they're very kind of interrelated. The stories are interrelated,
Yeah.
because I don't actually want to read like short stories that are not connected. I'm at a
Hmm.
point where I want to, like, even though I know it's clearly a short story, I want that relation to the next story so that the whole
Yeah.
thing works together.
My last two books, one of which is coming out very soon, Tales to Keep You Up at Night, and they are. I wanted all of the stories to stand on their own, but I definitely also wanted to tie them together because, first of all, my editor thought that that would be a good idea, and I gave me some ideas about how to make that work. But I agree. Like I would even call these two story collections novels. I wonder, like in terms of attention span for kids nowadays, if having a short little chunk is of a tale is appealing, or if they do want to stick with one character or a group of characters all the way through a 200 page 250, 300 page, hopefully not longer than that book. What are you thinking about how kids are focusing in terms of our current culture and climate?
Well, first I want to say that I did not read Tales That Keep You Up at Night as as separate stories. They read completely through like a full novel. Like
Oh, cool.
I did not like until you said that I just realized, oh my gosh, I guess you're right. Because they were separate stories, but I didn't read it like that. It read like a full novel. So
That's so funny. I love that.
so I'm kind of like, whoa, did I miss something? And you know how much I loved that book. I adored that book. It would just it was such an old timey creepy feeling, right? It was my
Yeah,
favorite
like
part of that.
classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um
Oh, thank you.
no, I love it, of course. But I'm your biggest fan, Dan. I feel like I said that like from The Incredibles. I'm your biggest fan.
Oh, yeah, sure, syndrome.
I can't wait for the new book to come out. But in terms
Oh,
of
thanks.
the how kids are reading now, did you see the article in Publishers Weekly where somebody was talking about the fact that middle grade novels are too long and that
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're asking for novels to be 200 pages or less now,
Yeah.
which Haru is 159 pages.
There you go. Yes.
But I feel
On the
like,
ball, Ellen.
yeah, and I feel like your book was pretty short too. Like you tend to write, you don't tend to write 500-page tomes either. Like,
The funny thing was, like, for that book, I ended up cutting out like 30,000 words,
oh,
which was ridiculous. I mean, the first draft came in at like 90,000 words, and I cut out at least 33. And same thing. Oh no, maybe it was for book two. That's what I did for book
okay.
two, and just to sort of match the page count of the first book, because the publisher was like, we'd like these to kind of look similar if they were sitting next to each other on a shelf.
Right.
But
Wait, how many
but yeah,
pages is the first one?
I want to say maybe around 270.
Yeah, that
Um,
it
yeah, but
reads very fast paced.
yeah, but the designers did this really fun thing. Sorry, I'm talking about myself. Might even cut this out, but like
No, Dan,
the
I don't
designers
you dare
did
cut it out.
the designers, Mary Claire Cruz, and the illustrator, Murray Bergeron, were just they did amazing things. And in terms of um putting the book together, there's the story of Amelia, who is reading the scary stories, and then there are the scary stories themselves, and they designed the book to have two different sort of flavors while you're looking at the page. Like the stories within the story look like an old storybook.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think, in terms of what they were able to fit onto the page, like that might have expanded the book, the
Mm-hmm.
page count a little bit. But yeah, I'm trying to I'm trying to keep the page count small, because even I, as an adult, like if a book is longer than 350, I might still read it, but like I'm definitely going to be a little bit intimidated or hesitant to even like, because my time is so short at this point. Like my attention is so short.
But also, I'm very jealous because that you have illustrations in your book, which was just amazing.
Yeah, that was so cool to be able
So
to see
cool.
that.
Yeah, and that's why it doesn't count. Like the lane doesn't count as much because you have
Yeah,
illustrations, so it's cool.
there
Uh,
you go.
but I think that it seems to be shorter is what they're looking for, and I kind of think it makes sense because we are looking at everybody looking at things in shorter and smaller chunks, right? Social media works that
Yeah,
way. TikTok works that way. Like everything is like bite-sized stuff, right?
we have to compete, and I think that's part of the reason why we're writing things that are going to make kids want to turn pages,
Hmm.
right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So anyway, on that note, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. This was a wonderful conversation. I look forward to more, and I can't wait to read Haru and see how the whole situation goes down with this billionaire guy.
And I can't wait to read the second Tales. Oh my gosh, when's it coming out? I really love the first one
In
so much.
August, yeah.
Oh, can't wait.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll have them send you one. So
Oh, that'd be
anyway,
amazing. Thank you.
thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, Dan. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Ellen O one more time for speaking with me. Once again, her books are Spirit Hunters, Finding Junie Kim, You Are Here, and many, many more. Her latest, Haru, Zombie Dog Hero, is available now, and I hope you'll pick up a copy. It really, really looks fun. I'd also like to thank you for coming back and listening again. If you'd like, you can follow this podcast's social media at Our First Fears, one word, on the site formerly known as Twitter, as well as on Instagram. And feel free to reach out at ourfirstfears@gmail.com. Let me know what kind of zombie fan you are. Slow zombie, fast zombie, or dog zombie. Thanks again for your time. I'm Dan Poblocki, wishing you sweet dreams and pleasant nightmares.